I'm completely comfortable with you giving me whatever pushback ever for whatever.
For sure.
Because I know how important this is to you. And I've been in your shoes to a degree. So I want to make sure it's representative of your vision. But it's striking.
Yeah.
It's striking. And yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it when it's time. So I have like a little spiel that I kind of go through. And then we start and we talk to you first. And then we'll talk about the record. So it'll take us. We'll see where it takes us.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
And
Well,
tested London's mic?
We did test London's mic. Go ahead, London, one more time.
Test 1 2 1 2 test. I want this a little lower.
I'm gonna turn you up a little bit. Okay. All right. Welcome. The middle Brady child is who I sounded like. Pork chops and applesauce. That's an old people's joke. All right. Welcome. I am Rob Wallace. This is the Zero Noise Podcast, where we engage in progressive discussions about music, life, and everything in between with our guests. This podcast is brought to you by Grove Studios, the 24/7 artist and production workspace. Whether rehearsing for your next show, producing a new show, that doesn't make sense. Whether rehearsing for your next show or producing a new song, produce a new song, doing a podcast or shooting a video, Grove Studios is set up for the independent creator. Right now, Grove is offering subscriptions that can help you get your project or next creation popping off. To learn more, visit grovestudios.space. We are also sponsored by Leon Speakers, the #1 brand in home audio luxury. That changes every time too. But check them out at leonspeakers.com. And I gotta show my shirt. Detroit Originals. We're also sponsored by Detroit Originals. Check them out at Detroit_Originals on Instagram for some gear. Shout out to the Brock family. Those are like some cousins of mine. This podcast is produced by Project Plugin, Crimson Media, and shared with all streaming platforms through Captivate. And today I am also joined by Maia Evans from Leon Speakers and the Amplify Fellowship.
Hello, everyone.
So, my life's work is to lift music and hip-hop specifically as both the historical subtext and the product of American culture, a medium of liberation and the soundtrack for the search for Black freedom collectively and individually. The album is a source of critical discourse about life in America by those who create it. I want to know about the music that changed the way our guests thought. Along the way, we will explore how music speaks to who we are and who we desire to be. Art is not valuable if it does not challenge, if it does not ask, and if it does not respond. We acknowledge that music decorates time as art decorates space. I ask dope people to visit with me, talk about who they are, who they have been, and what they do. I also ask them to be ready to discuss an album that played a role in them becoming them. A little bit different today. You will not hear the music we will discuss for many reasons, but you will never hear it the same afterwards. Therefore, this is a music podcast, but it is a people's podcast. And today, the person is London Beck, and the album is the Black Satin Sessions. Welcome, London Beck.
Yes, thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you here. So let's give a little bit of context just for people who may be new. Maia, you want to talk a little bit about the fellowship and how London is involved in that?
Absolutely. So Rod and I have been working very closely together over the last year.
Yes.
Almost. So this is our pilot year of the Amplify Fellowship, which is a partnership between Grove Studios and Leon Speakers. Representatives and co-founders include me and Rod. And our mission is to uplift Black voices in Washtenaw County, and that is what our fellows do so well. So our fellows are London Beck here, as well as Danny Darling and Kenyatta Rashawn.
Excellent. So, London, how are you doing, first of all?
I am doing really well.
What are three adjectives that describe where you are in your life right now?
And then proceeds to write a novel. I would definitely say revitalized. I keep coming back to revitalized. We definitely kind of, I don't know, I kind of feel like it's kind of like that moment in like cartoons where like there's a character that kind of like gets all the color drained out of them and they're all gray and they're just kind of like miserable and like mopey and morose. But I feel like I've gotten a lot of that like color and vibrancy back. So definitely revitalized. I will say, and this is like multiple words, on the path to reclaiming peace,
Okay.
which I think is really important. And I would say,
so we got revitalized. We got reclaiming
peace.
Right.
Reclaiming my time.
Right. Reclaiming your time, reclaiming your peace.
And I definitely feel, which is like part of my motto, like unapologetic.
Nice.
So this question is kind of related, but there may be people who are listening that are really encountering you for the first time. Who is London Beck?
I would definitely say, well, I'll give you a little bit of backstory to kind of answer this question.
That is exactly why we are here, for the backstory. Go for it.
So when I was about 14, so that was like for me, like early high school, I was like making music. Of course, like music's like very ingrained into my DNA. Basically, like came out of the womb, like singing and like exploring with like musical instruments and whatnot. But kind of around that first year of high school, like when you're like early teens, when you're like super young and like impressionable, I was just creating music, but I was more so creating it for me. And I had a lot of friends who were like, wow, like this is like really good. Like you should release it. Like a lot of friends who were like in bands, like already performing, like that young in like local venues and whatnot. And I was like, I just decided one day, I was like, why not? I just started releasing music. And I think at that point I had gone, I think my stage name was like Robbie T. Grayson. So like at this point, like Robbie is like my government name.
Right. Robbie. Okay.
I guess like
was that short for Robert, by the way?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at this point, like my dead name.
Okay.
So I always hated like Robert.
Right. Right.
So like over the course of time, like my stage name like evolved to like at first it was like Robbie T. Grayson. It was like Rez Roslin. For like a hot minute it was like Roz. And then I went through this like temporary like Lord IV phase where I was like finding like my identity. My identity as an artist, but it was also like me trying to find my identity as a person.
Right.
And then I don't know, just London Beck just kind of like came out of nowhere, like represents so many things. Like I always had this like running theme of like royalty. So I guess like that's where like London comes from. Because when people think of London, they like instantly think like this like ancient like monarchy.
Right.
And then Beck is another word for like stream or river. So kind of like the thing that flows through my veins, which is the music. And it just kind of ended up describing what I was going through at the time. I think that change was made in like 2017. And that was when I did kind of like that last final rebranding. And I really wanted it to, if anything else, I wanted people to understand from interactions with me or my music that like above all else, like I'm just here to be a creative and I'm here to use my talents and my craft to not only tell my story, but share it with other people because I know that I've gone through tons of experiences that I'm not alone in, that I know a whole bunch of people out in the world are struggling through or have been met with. There are people who need to know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to, at the same time, make sure that I'm always being true to me.
Right.
You know, like the journey of life is like so interesting, and that it's complex, and there are so many different like streams and paths that you can take, and some of them are really great, and of course then there are moments that are really not, but there's always a lesson in that.
Right.
And then this is like where you get like a little sneak peek, by the way, of my like group chats with people. My like little like a group chat with like Danny and Kenyatta, and
right.
I'm always like having these like little like, I'm always like unapologetic, like, yeah, like fuck you London, and all of a sudden they'll like get like a little text message, and I'll be like, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful. And so that's pretty much, I think that's probably the best way to describe me. I mean, there's that side that's kind of like the dragon, I guess. But then there's also that side that I make sure that's grounded, that never forgets kind of like where I'm coming from, because that's part of the blueprint in terms of like where I want to go,
right.
and how I want to get there without causing unnecessary disruption. There's disruption in our lives that we have to go through that really kind of like forges us and like makes us who we are. But
right.
then there's also disruption that you can kind of avoid if you just take a moment to like think about it.
I think that you've definitely struck me as a person who has like, I guess what you would term like a high vibration. Like you have a bright, every time that we talk and we meet, you always have a very bright perspective, but there is an edge involved that especially comes out through your music. And I'm really interested in how you got to that point. You talked about beginnings. You talked about being, tell us a little bit about how you grew up. Do you know this person here? So tell us.
I remember.
Tell us a little bit about that person, and
For sure. So Little London, or then of course Robbie.
Right.
I originally was raised with my mother, and then I've got two older sisters. My parents were both divorced.
Right.
And I remember, I love that picture. I do look at it from time to time.
Right.
Just to kind of reminisce and remember. I think there was like, I was out for like picture day, and we were all getting ready to like get on the bus. I was in preschool, getting ready to like go home, and I had like a teacher like snatch me up, and like little me was like, oh, okay, and like lead me into the gym and be like, you need to take your pictures. I was like, okay. It has been said that my mom actually hoped that I'd be like a famous like sports person.
Okay.
And there is a little bit of like sportiness, sporty spice in me.
Sporty spice.
I think you have all the spice girls within you.
That is fair, yes.
Right.
I think like our very first like in-person meeting, that was like very like posh spice, because I had on that like white, like that very like white kind of like Dawn, like head of like some sort of like corporation, right, or like LLC, like jacket, and then I had on that like leather or that leopard.
Yeah. Like you never can guess. Like you came and we listened to your record here, and you had on like the pink leopard pants. Well, like I forget, it was like with a regular t-shirt or something like that. And I was like, they just always find a way to spice it. Absolutely.
So yeah, I was raised by my mother, my two sisters.
Right.
At 5, there was one morning I was supposed to be woken up by my mom. My oldest sister, who's like 17 years older than me, she didn't live in the household at that point.
Both your sisters were really older than you?
Yes. So
Okay.
like my oldest sister's like 17 years older than me. My older sister's like 12 years older than I am.
Wow.
So I'm like very much a baby.
Right. Okay.
And my older sister was off at school, oldest sister not in the household. I like woke up and I was just kind of like, where is mommy? Like it's time to go to school. And I ended up finding her on the bathroom floor. So I was the one to, I don't know how I managed to do this at 5 years old, but I ended up calling the ambulance and like they showed up. And long story short, my mother didn't make it. So at that point, my dad swooped in and I came to live with him and my paternal grandparents, who really ended up being the ones to raise me. There was a period before my mom had passed, I started to sing. There was like this little, we used to have like a CD in the car, and to this day, like I can't remember enough of the song, but all I remember was that it was track 3 and it had the word Dragonfly on the CD. And I would always put it in the car and I'd like skip to track 3. And I just like belt this like song and just like, I don't know. I remember, the only thing that I can remember the clearest is just like the way that it felt, the way that it made me feel to like be belting this song that I didn't know, you know, like was anything about. Like it could have been like talking about like explicit like grown-up topics. And I was just like, la, 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 la.
Right. Right.
But that's like a feeling that I've never forgotten. And I think that now that I think about it, it probably did play like a large part in why I am where I am now.
Right.
But there was a period where I just kind of like withdrew, because as a child, people don't necessarily break it down in the step that not only did a child that young like lose their parent, but like at 5 years old, you are literally grasping the concept of like being alive and breathing and how to be a human. Like you're only like a few years out of like learning how to like literally how to walk.
Right. Right.
And you're like learning how to like do, you know, like normal things that most people don't really have to think about on a regular basis, like use the bathroom, brushing your teeth, things like that. So it's kind of like I'm learning how to be a human and I lose kind of like the main person,
the center,
to like help teach me that, the grounding point. Yeah.
Right.
So I did withdraw into myself, but I started to open up a little more through the singing. And from then that kind of like became my safe place, to where I would kind of go and just kind of like retreat if I needed my own kind of like space.
So music gave you like solace to...
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. And that's been like super helpful. I don't come from a family that's like particularly close. And there are a lot of cycles that I feel could stand some breaking.
Okay.
And so there's been like a lot of dissonance. Like music has definitely been kind of like the thing to help me work through that. Because it's like people think, when you think about your family, like those, the way that we are generally like taught and told, like that is like your grounding point. Like
Absolutely.
Those are the people that, you know, like you really want there for you when the whole world is not.
Absolutely.
So
they are your world.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's an interesting experience, like feeling that you don't really have that, and then having to go out into the world and make that. So a lot of my childhood and like teen years and like up until maybe like a couple years ago were really kind of like finding, you'll often hear me talk about like my tribe or like my chosen family.
Right.
It was really the journey of like figuring out like what that is and like what that looks like. And so really like especially throughout my teen years, like I really invested in, like not only finding like friends, but like finding like a chosen family, like a circle of people who really could give me what I wasn't able to get through kind of like, I guess, conventional means.
Yeah.
And even then, like, it didn't really click. I used to work at a restaurant as a bartender, and then eventually I was like dual like bartender and manager, and it really didn't click. It was like, that restaurant was a very like special place. Like there are like these little pockets in the world where like people would like congregate and like everybody would get along, and like if we weren't in that space, like we would just pass each other on the street and like not interact at all. But it was really through that experience where I really learned kind of like the value of chosen family and what that means, and like being able to swallow, like, I may not be able to have this in the way that I need to be fulfilled, but I can still get what I need through this other kind of like vehicle. Like there will always be people to support you. It's just that in my particular situation, I just have to do a little work, and I have to go out and find that. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think people kind of like freak out and they're like, I mean, it's on it. I mean, it's understandable, but sometimes like the greatest gifts come in the way that we don't really expect them to come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of gifts, one thing that Maia and I speak about a lot is what the multiple values that you bring to the table. And we could talk about the musical stuff, but a lot of what you have encountered allows you to step into a group and become like a glue to groups. And it's interesting that you bring that up as I go back through all of the conversations and discussions that we've had in the last, what has it been, like 9 months now? Almost? Yeah, 9 months. And how you've always been, whatever it takes, I'll do it, whatever. It's this, whatever. And that's really, that what you just said really gives a lot of insight into why that is. And to be, to feel as though we are a little bit of that tribe for you in a way, or maybe a segment of it, is really something that's extremely valuable to me. I'll say that. I'm really curious about, it's one thing to sing in the car. It's one thing to, be able to connect with the notes and things of that nature. It's another thing to make those 12 notes kind of jump off the paper and become something that you kind of can manipulate. What instruments do you play?
A lot.
Let's just make the list real quick.
So of course I sing. I'm classically trained in viola.
Which is an instrument into itself. Viola, I'm sorry.
Yep, no worries. Viola. And then I can I'm like not professional level yet, but I can do acoustic/electric guitar. I can play bass. I can do violin. I can do a little bit of cello. And I'm sure that the list will continue to grow as I continue. Yep.
Right.
As I continue to age.
And the technology.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about as well. We'll talk about that as well. So you've encountered, and you've already kind of answered this question, but you've encountered a very traumatic event, and you're in a situation that is extremely fragmented. You've already pointed towards music as being a place of peace, a place of solace. How did, and I guess this is more of a systemic question for you, like what did you get involved in, and who were your early influences to change it from this is something that I like to do to something that this is something that I can do?
For sure. I mean, I have always been involved in everything under the sun. Anything I could get my hands on.
And who do you give credit for that? Was that your grandparents that did that?
I would definitely say my grandparents, because once they saw me come out of my shell and like start to be musical around the house, they were like, huh. And then it just like didn't stop. We used to have like an old like I forget like what model it is. It's kind of like one of
probably
those.
Not old to me. That's what makes me upset. Like, what? You know what I'm saying?
For sure. I will put it this way. It was definitely vintage enough for it to be playing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and it sounded like video game music.
Oh, it had like a preset thing? Yeah. Okay, cool.
But I absolutely loved it. And like I would sneak downstairs and like just start playing it. And they would like notice that I kept like coming back to this. They were like, huh. And it didn't really start to, I mean, of course, like in elementary school, you're in like the little like rinky-dink choir, like singing like hot cross buns.
Right.
You know, Mary had a little lamb. And then 5th grade, I grew up in Ann Arbor Public School System.
Okay. That's
when here they kind of like throw you into the pond a little bit and they have you choose like 3 different instruments that you want to play. And then there's like a day there where like half of it is dedicated to like experimenting with those instruments. So they kind of like test you on your first choice and then they might test you on your second choice. I was like this close to being a clarinetist. And of course I got my first choice, which was the viola. Of course, I always wanted to be different. That probably was also me since leaving the womb. I was like, I want to play violin. I was like, everybody plays violin. I want to stand out. I want people to see me.
Right.
So I chose viola, and in orchestra class, I was just like rearing to go. I like wanted to play the instrument. Like the first couple of weeks they tell you like not really to touch it. And I was like, okay. And I went home and like opened it and was like experimenting and like already trying to figure out how to make music. And after class was over, while everyone was packing up, I would be like playing like Amazing Grace. And like my teacher, who taught me through middle school and was actually the cellist for one of the songs all on the other end will get to hear eventually. She like saw me and she was like, you're gonna do a solo for the concert that's coming up. And I was like, what? I was like, oh. I was like, I wanted you to hear me, but I didn't want you to hear me that well. And I was like, okay. So I did the solo. And of course, like my grandparents were there. So like at that point that it became like really real to them. Like this is something, like this is an avenue for this kid. Yeah. This is a pathway. And, you know, like at that point, they probably would say it might even be a passion. So that was kind of the, I guess, like the diving board, so to speak, for the rest. And then of course in middle school, like continue with orchestra. At the end of 8th grade, like everyone has their like typical like DC trip. I did a little karaoke. So like by the end of that year, I did choir and orchestra. Wow. So like at the end of our showcase, I was like playing, you know, like Brandenburg, and then I'd had to like run backstage and then like run back on, and I had a solo that night as well. So like it's just kind of like experiences like that all throughout high school. I did a talent show freshman year. Anytime there was an assembly, they'd be like, do you want to sing? I'd be like, and all throughout being a part of like, I did like symphony orchestra. I was always like first stand or first chair. I was in like the Music Honor Society. I did musical theater, like all of these other things. We tried to do kind of like a chamber group club a couple years. And then that kind of progressed. Our very last concert, my last orchestra concert of high school, my orchestra director who played viola
on Black Satin Sessions.
On Black Satin Sessions. She allowed me the opportunity to be the first student ever to conduct the orchestra.
Wow.
So
Wow.
So that was, of course, like a mind-blowing like experience. Of course, like high school, again, you're still in those like formidable years and you're very like impressionable. But like also that's when the orchestra world kind of like becomes like cutthroat, where like kids are literally like, they're already at like 13, 14, like, I want to sabotage you because my parents say that I can be first chair and I want to be first chair and you're first chair and I don't think you deserve first chair. So
and there's so much politics to it.
It's
it is insane.
Right.
I tell you.
As a quick aside,
Please.
Rod, did you play any instruments in school?
I did. I played the drums. I played the drums through middle school. When I got in high school, I stopped playing the drums. But by that time, I also had this was before both of your time. I had a old Casio keyboard that had like 3 seconds of sample time. And I never really learned how to play the piano formally. Yeah. I knew how to play what I wanted to hear. And I had that the entire time. I also had like a dual cassette deck where we would like record ourselves rhyming on people's music and stuff like that. But no, I didn't play formally in high school, but all through upper L and middle school, I definitely did. And it definitely took, I remember my dad bought me a drum. He bought me a snare. And, I would practice on it and this, that, and the third. It didn't take very long for them to get tired of it, So, yeah. So, yep, it probably is still, nope, it's not in my parents' basement anymore. But thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yes. So I played trumpet and not trombone. My sister played trombone. I played trumpet and French horn very briefly, but then I switched to choir.
Okay.
And then I was in choir for like 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what London sort of touched on and what I want to say is that like these music programs in these schools are like so critical for a lot of people's development. And not just musically, but in becoming themselves, feeling a sense of belonging, doing true collaboration. Like we all know those stupid PowerPoint group projects that like it only divides you more than
absolutely
actually coming together. Whereas as music, it's way more of a coming together activity.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I see it as it's just another opportunity to develop discipline as well, like self-discipline. The iterative process where you have to practice and you have to make mistakes in order to get better, and you learn incrementally, and you may learn one new thing, and you learn something in the process of learning that. I think that's an important skill for kids, definitely. I'm also curious about you're going through this process too. Did you go to Ann Arbor schools too?
No, I went to Chelsea.
Oh, okay. And there are a lot of resources in Ann Arbor, to provide this type of programming that you're talking about. What I'm curious about whether or not the additional, how did it feel to go through that? I'm trying to figure out how to word this best, but you were a Black man going through these things.
Yeah. And
there weren't I'm curious about, did you see a lot of young Black men playing strings? Did you, or in choir, and kind of what that experience was like?
I would definitely say that there were a few. Okay. There weren't a lot, of course.
Okay.
But there were definitely a few. I would say there were more than I would expect. In middle school, good. Kind of like not so much. Once I got to high school, it was a little more, a tiny bit more diverse. And looking back on it, I think, especially as I began to like become older and kind of like enter the like 17, like 18 years of age, I really saw it as an opportunity to kind of like show that there are different sides to being Black than
absolutely
like societal stereotypes and preconceived notions. Like being Black is as diverse as being anything else. You can literally, you're not, a lot of people might have I'm going to say some people might have the idea that like Black people are like not creative, or like that they come from like one area,
or their musical like taste only leans in one direction.
Yeah, right. And it's like, but it's like I'm not like I'm not an alien. There are plenty of people who look like me, who have diverse tastes,
Absolutely.
who have diverse skill sets, who, are like going above and beyond. It's just that we are not always afforded that opportunity to shine. So I think part of it too, and especially toward the latter end, I forced myself to they have an African American humanities course at the high school that I went to. And that's what I took my senior year. And that kind of really helped me see and understand the much larger picture of me always being at the forefront of things where there are a lot of kids in the school and I'm the one that they're focusing on.
Are you comfortable in that space?
So I would, definitely now, yes.
Okay.
Not just being Black, but also being like a queer individual.
Okay.
There's not a lot of, people think that there's not a lot of opportunities for people who fit into those groups or even in pockets where they intersect, where there are spaces for them to shine. And my motto, especially nowadays, is there's always a space for you to shine. You just have to learn you just have to create it.
Right.
But not a lot of people have the courage to do that. And so, especially those later years up until present, that's kind of when it all clicked. When I realized like everything that I had been going through and everything that I was feeling could be used to inspire and encourage someone else. And it only kind of helped to further that idea because people, like I have, like even my friends, like they'll just kind of like stop mid-conversation and be like, how are you like still alive? Like, how are you here? How do you, like, it's just incredible, like how you keep, kind of like coming back like bigger and better and stronger. And it's like, I'm just, the only thing that I can really tell people is I'm creating and I'm investing in the space that I know is for me. And I know it's for me because I am making it and I'm not allowing anybody else's input to ruin that.
Absolutely.
In that same vein, do you want to talk about your relationship with the neutral zone?
Yes. So the neutral zone, for those of you who don't know, local organization here in Ann Arbor. They do quite a few things for the local youth, but one of the primary initiatives is that they create kind of creative safe spaces for local youth. So it's a space where after school hours, like you can just go and kind of like gain a sense of community and even just like work on homework, but you can also like take different like workshops and they've got like writing workshops, like story writing workshops. You can take like songwriting workshops. You can learn how to produce music, filmmaking. They have their own youth-led like record label. And that was an organization that I encountered sporadically through kind of my grade school days. We would have field trips, a few like throughout middle school, and then maybe like a couple early high school. And it was kind of through those initiatives that I began to be interested in what they were doing. In 2015, they used to have like a programming like Live on Washington. They gave me like the honor of like being the opening act for, I think, the Black Opera.
Okay.
At the time.
Shout out to the Black Opera.
Yes.
Buff One, Majestic Legend. We just had them on a couple weeks ago. Well, we had Buff One on a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that was like incredible. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm opening. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I'm opening. I've never done this before. And I was like, oh
right. Right.
So it was through different experiences like that. And then of course, again, I have tons of friends, people in the community that I know who are like heavily engaged in the youth programs. So when I received the opportunity to be one of the fellows of the Amplify Fellowship, and we talked about the community engagement, I just thought it was very fitting, given my background and what I want to convey to other people, but also kind of the initiatives that I might want to start later on down the line when I'm a little more established and we're a little more stable. I just thought it was really fitting to see if we could establish a partnership with the Neutral Zone.
Yeah.
And so they've been recruiting me for like different workshops. We had one on May 28th.
Yep.
Which went really well. It was really great. I got to teach music composition. Haven't done that in a while. I usually do at the Ann Arbor Public Schools, usually rents out Interlochen Music Camp and Academy for a week during the summer. And I'm usually the viola sectional coach for Skyline. And also I teach the composition enrichment class. So after not doing that because of the Rona for the past couple of years, I'm like...
The pan pizza?
I'm like deprived of like teaching. And I'm just like, I just want to teach the young people how to make music.
Right.
So like that was amazing. There are going to be plenty more to come. But for now, we're kind of like easing into like the musical aspects. Thankfully, they love me enough to kind of like keep me around at least for the rest of the summer. So I'm super excited to see what else I can get into.
I really want to talk to you about what happened when you applied.
Yes.
Okay. So Maia and I had a spreadsheet of all of the respondents. And I guess I can talk about my experience first. What we did was, just being transparent, we obviously went through and we looked at the responses to the questions that we asked. So just so everybody knows, the Amplify Fellowship, there's an application process where not only does it collect information about your regular information, but we also want to understand your connection to the community piece. Yours was very authentic and very, it was well done. So then we started to look through your music and your social media. And we did it separately. And we kind of came back together and said, okay, like, who are the top? And your music it didn't match. This is what I can remember. It didn't match because the music, the visuals, the quality of the music didn't match your reach. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
It didn't match. How could I say this? I hate using like social media followers as currency, but it didn't, your website was there. Your music was very professionally recorded and mixed and mastered and everything. But you still kind of were a little bit of a secret, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So when we came back together and we started going through names of finalists and people we want to interview, I don't even think we had a lot of discussion about whether or not you would be involved. It was like, oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. What are we thinking about? What are we talking about? Do you remember that experience too? Like when you first ran across London's music?
I do. Yeah, and just the content of your music too. Like, we were really looking for people who were writing about interesting things, like, and that had a voice and had something to say, and that I think is what really stuck out to me about you, is that you had a very, very loud and clear voice, and that the reach wasn't quite what we thought it was, right? And so that's kind of what the Amplify Fellowship is about, is providing that reach, leveraging the resources that we have to sort of get lesser known people out there. And yeah, you just seemed like the perfect candidate from the start.
You seem like the person that needed to be amplified, like proof positive of that. And then we went through the interview and you began to talk about how you control the entire process. How have you... It is about control, especially it's one thing to have the control of being able to tell somebody you want to take multiple takes of a singing part if you're just a vocalist, or you go back and you play a part 55 times, but you control the entirety of the process. And spoken from a person who's recorded and stuff like that, engineered a little bit, and it becomes an obsession. Are you obsessed, especially when it gets to that point, the mixing and the mastering? Like, walk us through what you go through mentally about that.
For sure. So, especially before the Black Satin Sessions,
okay,
like everything, I'm self-recording, producing, engineering, like the whole bit. One thing that I consistently focus on is when I record, to the best of my ability, I try to pretend as if somebody else was recording, because I'm basically, for me, it's like training.
Mm-hmm.
I'm training for those moments when I am working with a producer, because if somebody other than me is helping me create my vision, I need to be able to understand how to articulate that the way that they need, so that they can make the changes that I'm looking to see and bringing the vision to life. So as much as I can, I think this process, I tried to have it mapped out a bit organically, because like, I believe I've released, with the exception of Angel, well, no, even aside from Angel, maybe like 2 projects a year.
Mm-hmm.
Angel and not Drift. Blinded by Hunger was 2018, early 2018.
Totally produced by you.
Then
Totally mixed by you. Totally mastered by you.
Oh yeah.
Totally recorded. Played everything. Okay.
Yes.
I need people to hear that.
And then there was the Revelations EP.
Mm-hmm.
That was 2018. Then there was Drift EP 2019.
Right.
Again, all of that, all created by me.
All of it.
Except the cover art. I have like connections with very close friends, and another facet is like, in areas where like I know I definitely can't, I like to check in with the people around me first, because even though it's my art and I want to focus on my promotion first, if I can bring someone that also has talent and someone that I know and I trust, but also is like trying to move themselves forward, like I want to team up with you. Absolutely. And I want to give you that opportunity. Okay. So, but like aside from that, like everything, all me, Drift 2019, Angel was supposed to come out in 2019, but I had too much shit I wanted to put on it, and I needed to make some decisions.
Right.
So that ended up coming out early
2020.
Mm-hmm. And up until the Black Satin Sessions, like I tried to be like, I'll write this much in this amount of time. I'll produce this much in this amount of time. And of course, like for me, I'll do that. And I know like good and well that it doesn't really, for me, like it does not happen in that order. Sometimes I will come up with the songwriting first, or part of it first. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll come up with the production side first. And then we just kind of like meet the other end and make it happen.
It just kind of grows.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable being as, I don't want to say rigid, but are you comfortable going through the same process with other people at this point?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That was, and I know even with the Black Satin Sessions, I still was kind of like in that safety bubble of like control.
Right.
But at the same time, like as much as I could see to allow to kind of like get some of the other things that I wanted to dip in the pond and try.
Right.
Like from here on out, like I do want to like
work with other artists
and other artists and just kind of include them in the process.
Yeah, and I'm talking about specifically producing and working with other artists, because the reason when we were having early discussions about you, we talked about what can we do to take some of the stress or some of the workload away from London, so London can focus on one thing, or focus on songwriting for this song, or focus on producing or playing for this one song. But then we kind of start thinking about it and was like, wait a minute. With London being able to do everything, obviously you would need to be able to pick what you wanted to do and what you didn't want to do. But the fact that you're able to do everything and you're able to prove that you're able to do everything in this platform gives you so much flexibility in terms of what you can do, that maybe we can give you the opportunity to do all those different things, and then people can pick and choose how they want to use you. If you want to, people can come to you as a session musician. They can come to you as an instructor. They can come to you as a mix engineer. They can come to you as a recording engineer. Plus you make your own music. Plus you have a different image, so that's when we start throwing around that term, that auteur term, because there's so many different things that you can do. Why not try to put you in a position to continue to develop all of them as long as you're comfortable? But it was, I think, one of my favorite moments during the fellowship was seeing you conducting and working with the quintet. The pictures that came out of it, and then for you to share with me that you had teachers that were a part of it, it just seemed like everything came full circle.
Yes. And that was probably like the most important part of this experience. I know I have said this like 1,010 times in other like interviews, articles, mediums, platforms. Before this opportunity, let's go back. Before COVID, I kind of felt like I was getting ready to just like jump in the air and like grow wings and fly. I had released Angel, which was really like my like big push. I mean, of course, as I learn and keep working and growing, like my music continues to evolve. But like that was even when I started to like step back, and just as a listener, I was like, wow, I was like, this does not at all sound like, I was like, this sounds much different and much more polished than the last 3 projects.
Yes, that's a good word, polish.
And I was going to, I think like in 2019, I released like a lookbook, and like I was going to turn that into a whole brand, and I was going to launch a music festival, and I already had like 6 different acts that were going to perform, and like we were just going to like have like a rockin' time at the Blind Pig, and then all of a sudden it was like
splat.
It was like, goodbye.
Right.
Like, it was like everything's closed, everything's shut down. And I was like, and then there were a bunch of personal things that I had to like work through, and like all of that together was just kind of like, wow, like I really feel like I missed the mark. And I was like not, and by the time like the end of that year rolled around, I was like, I just kind of felt like at this point, like, what do I have left to give, I guess. And then a friend just happened to send me the Amplify Fellowship link, and she was like, you're going to do something with this. You need to apply. And I was like, okay. And so I like filled it out, and I was like, I guess at this point, like, what do I have left to lose? And then, like a couple weeks rolled around, and then it was like, you're a finalist. And I was like, okay. And that kind of gave me a little boost. And then I was like looking, and like, of course, by that time I had already like heard of like Danny Darling, like Legend. And then you've got Kenyatta, which we've been fittingly calling her, like innovate, because she's just on the mark every time.
Absolutely.
And no beads of sweat. And
absolutely.
I'm like, okay. I got a little nervous, right. And I was like, do I belong here?
Right.
And then we had our interview, and I just took a deep breath. I remember the night before, there was a point before COVID, I was like going to move to California. And there was a friend that I had met at NYU during my time in college there, and we were going to move in together, and I was like video messaging her, and I was like, I need you to help me test the sound, and like, I want this to like be perfect, and blah, 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 blah. And then before we had our interview, I just took a deep breath, and I was like, just be you. And I was like, that's the easiest thing that you can do, right? And then a couple of days later, I was like, you got it. And I was like bouncing off the walls, and I was like, screaming. So from that point on, I know that's like to make a long story longer, I really wanted the process to, since it was kind of like a one-of-a-kind opportunity for me, I really wanted to use this opportunity to not only do things that a lot of people don't really get to see me doing, but I also wanted to bring it full circle because there are a lot of people who have helped me to get to this point.
Great. Fantastic. So you kicked off June with the kickback, and June is Pride Month. And I really would like, before we talk about the album, I really would like to talk about how you sought your truth through the creation of this project. Can you talk a little bit about that in lieu of the time that we're in right now?
Of course. I think it's safe to say that of course, everyone has their own individual stories to tell, but I think that with the world right now, there's definitely a lot of overlap.
Absolutely.
And it has really hit us probably like nothing most of us have ever experienced ever before. And one thing that I constantly think of, Nina Simone, who is one of my many idols, music loves, she said that an artist's duty is to reflect the times. Part of music in a sense, or in one of many ways, is a zeitgeist of what we are going through right now.
Right.
And this particular time was a new time for me. It was a time for me to, usually I'm doing like 11 different things. But there were times throughout this 1.5 to 2 years where I had to stop. And I had to really think about feeling what I needed to feel. I had to think about what I was actually going through. I had to think about going back to the feelings part, processing those emotions, because it's really easy to, at the surface level, it's really easy to say that you can get mad or be sad or be depressed or be happy or what have you, but the capacity to feel is like much more complex than that. The way that we feel plays such an integral part of our lives that it literally affects our health.
It does.
Like when I get angry, like the temperature of my body literally will elevate and I start to get hot.
Yeah.
Or like if I'm really sad, like I don't have like any energy to really do the things that I need or want to get done. And so I really wanted to, on top of that, there's a part of me that I guess presents to the world as like invulnerable. And I really wanted to use...
You want to be considered invulnerable?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
But just because of, at this point in my life, I guess going back to what you said earlier about like seeing me as the glue, like I recognize that. I don't know how or why, but like I just have this ability to just like bring people together. But I also know that through the relationships that I've invested in my life, like as much as I'm learning from other people, people are learning from me as well.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to show people that, like you'll ask me like how I'm like not falling apart. And the truth is like I'm constantly falling apart. Like, do you not see the trail of like pieces on the ground? And like I'm carrying this basket and I'm like trying to collect all the pieces and I have like my duct tape bracelet on this arm. I'm like, and then like I'll go around the corner where you can't see me and then just like wrap it up and like
it's like to a point where falling apart kind of becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And it's like the Tasmanian devil when he's spinning and we're watching, we're seeing all kinds of stuff flying or whatever, but that's a natural state.
Yeah.
I feel like we've all felt like that.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and be able to use that and learn from that. That is like an incredible tool in an artist's toolkit.
It is.
Of course.
It is. So let's talk about the album. The album comes out on June 11th, 2021.
Yes.
It's called the Black Satin Sessions. And look at how dope that is. I can't wait for everybody to hear this album, because for me, and we were talking about this before you came in, as much as it is an accomplishment in songwriting and production and things of that nature, it's also for me an accomplishment in engineering. And what I was sharing with Maia is, so there's 13 songs on this album, and every song it's almost like every song is a different flavor. Like you buy a cheesecake, you know, there's like cheesecake, you know, where you can buy, and it has like the New York cheesecake, it has like the raspberry swirl, it has like the one with the caramel on it, and everything is perfectly engineered in the way that type of music should be engineered. There's Bjork influences, there's Beyonce influences, there are songs that can be on urban radio, there's ballads, and even the way in which it's sequenced is very smart, because music is about tension and release. And we talked about this when we listened to it in the room too, how you have certain things juxtaposed with each other. And we talked about, like, where is London's home base? Like, where do you feel musically that you are really in your zone? Or is your zone everything? Does that make sense?
For sure. I would definitely say the latter. I don't really feel comfortable in like one area or the other. I think, and I really wanted to show that in this particular project. There are so many things that influence me. Mm-hmm. And of course I have to have like music like bumping and playing like all of the time. If you were to look at my playlist that I listen to every day in the car, you're going to see like Khruangbin, you're going to see Kehlani, you're going to see Beyonce, you're going to see her, you might see Bjork, you might see AC/DC or Alice Cooper or the Black Keys or Brittany Howard. Like, there are just so many different soundscapes that reflect all of the ideas that and all of the visions that I constantly see and am inspired by. And I'm glad that you said that, because one thing that makes this like project really special, this project is probably the first set of music that like I have cried to. I actually cried to my own album the other day. And it didn't really hit me until I got to the last track. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, wow.
You definitely have a relationship with that song.
Yes.
It's very obvious. I think that the song represents you in a way that is very unique. Like, because there are so many different spaces that you can go through. I mean, even in terms of the way that you dress, like you may have on like a plaid lumberjack shirt with some knee-high boots. You know what I'm saying? You it's very random, but at the same time it's extremely calculated. And what, again, in terms of, I look at it as great as the songwriting is and the production is, I look at the manner in which it's engineered. Like, we're going to talk about, kind of go through the songs in a way, but you change how you engineer every song as well. You can't engineer Eclipse the same way you engineer Territory or Black Satin. And that, for me, is something that I can appreciate from a technical perspective, because it takes a lot of trial and error to get to that point. I'm curious about your process in terms of, like, are you printing mixes and then listening to them elsewhere and then going back and because I know that's what I do. I'll print a mix, I'll listen to it in the bathroom, I'll listen to it in the car, I'll listen to it using this player on my phone. Is that part of your process as well? Because it's amazing.
Oh, definitely. I will say, especially this time around. So for me, like music production, of course, like it wasn't as much of, I guess, like an inherent talent as like the singing or like, I'm not even going to say playing viola because like even that took, time
yeah.
of progression and building up skill.
Right.
I do thank YouTube.
Yes.
YouTube.
Shout out to Sean Devine.
Yes.
Shout out to Help Me. What is it? Help Me Devin.
Help Me, Devin.
Shout out to Musician on a Mission. Shout out to all of them. The dude with the. Have you seen the dude with the puppet?
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out to all of you people. We are watching. Yes. I'm sorry.
And I've learned like through a lot of trial and error through like YouTube, but like I'll also read a lot of like articles and I look for like when I'm trying to like EQ like different like sounds and samples and tracks and whatnot, like I am looking for diagrams and like I'm looking to see like where exactly like let's say like a hi-hat is placed for this type of music and like why do we place it there and just like different things like that. I can definitely say I don't really engineer. I don't think I've ever engineered each like project the same.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
I like to come at it with fresh eyes. Of course, there are some things that I remember, but like I don't try to necessarily remember all of the things that I do with the previous project because I want to look at it with a fresh lens. I think that there's always something when we get kind of set into what we know, sometimes it's a bit easier to catch the things that we don't.
Yeah.
So I will never engineer anything the same.
Right.
But then at the same time, it goes back to like all of the influences that I listen to. Like when I am listening to a song, of course, like at face value, I'm listening to it kind of like at overall music production and how that's marrying with the lyrics. But then I will sit with a song and the next few times I listen to it, I'm paying attention to the lyrics of the song. I'll look up lyrics and I will dissect like everything that they're writing and like, why did you put this that way?
So you have the same perspective towards songwriting that you have with the infinite editing mentality we have with music production.
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
With this project, I mixed and mastered this like with my like studio headphones. I listened to it through monitors here at Grove Studios. I actually did like the final mastering in my car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like all of these different mediums, because I know that also affects how people are listening to it.
Absolutely.
Like, I want it to sound as great as it can in the car. I also want it to sound as great as it can through headphones.
Right.
Because I know that's how people are usually going to be listening to it.
Right.
I also want to hear how it's going to sound coming through my laptop speakers, because I know some people are going to be listening to it that way as well.
Right.
And I want to figure out how we can come to a common ground so that it sounds great everywhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do. If you would indulge me, can I get like a couple minutes to kind of just kind of quick shot them on some questions about engineering? Okay. What's on your master bus typically? And you can just give me the short answer. Just what's on your master bus typically? Like what do you have to have on your master bus?
Oof. Honestly, I can't.
You don't know?
I can't say. Well, I can't say because it
changes every time.
It changes every time.
Do you print mixes with a limiter before you master them?
No, because I want to see how it's going to perform in its natural state before I'm trying to like cut out clipping or like prevent, like different like weird volume spikes.
Do you EQ in mono?
Yes.
What's the first thing that you mix, typically? And I know that you're gonna say it depends, but what typically in a typical situation, what do you mix first?
So I'll put it this way: if I have all the building blocks, production's done, vocal recording's done, I'm wanting to mix like all of the like instrumental first, because I need to have the foundation set first.
Right.
I know like on Black Satin, for example,
right,
there's like a lot of like drums and like guitars and whatnot. I need to make sure that my guitar solos are sitting the way that I want them to sit. And if I want them to be EQ'd differently, I know like on that particular track, I have, and I love that I did this. Some of the solos, if you pay attention, are EQ'd in the right ear. Then it goes to the left.
They are.
And then some of them are very stereo. And then others are, some of the riffs that I play are EQ'd in mono.
Right.
Just so that we have a little bit of that consistency, stereo to kind of amplify it. I want to make sure that all of that is sitting in the environment the way that I'm hearing it in my head before I throw vocals in.
Absolutely.
Because if the foundation's not there, then it's going to make it a lot harder for me to kind of like figure out where the vocals are going to sit and how to get them to sit where they need to sit.
And how do you get vocals to sit
Oof.
the way that you get them to sit?
This is where I like credit like Help Me Devin. And
Yes.
honestly, I still don't have like a concrete like go to 100% fail proof process. But I have learned through watching his videos. There were a couple of articles. One thing I struggle with is like getting vocals to come through clearly. When I worked on Angel, I came across a few videos and articles where I think for vocals, I end up having like 3 different compressors. So I have like an overall compressor just to kind of dry up the recording a little bit and kind of make it bring a little more stability to that track. And then on my send, I have 2 more compressors.
Okay.
So one boosts the overall sound, and the other one is, I think on my side chain, I have 2 things, but one of them is like an equalizer. Equalizer cuts out everything except the hi-hat, and then I adjust that to bring out the clarity that I need so the vocals are not muddy.
I told you we were going to be nerds for a minute. Real quick, plug in that you cannot live without. Because you use a lot of DAW-based stuff.
Yes.
Like, use a lot of, what's it called?
I use Studio One for my DAW.
Okay.
Don't make me choose.
Okay.
What can I
do you use Waves stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Waves is cool.
Waves is cool. I'm gonna have to say anything isotope. I can make it work if I'm like creating music, but like I'm a perfectionist. I like things to sound as best as I can make them sound. And one thing that's important to me is color, but also clarity. I also don't like, and I know there's like this whole like loudness wars BS, and I absolutely hate it. But at the same time, I like to participate, and I want people.
You wanted to measure.
I wanted to measure as close as possibly, because I know that throws anybody who doesn't know like all of the like other stuff about music and is just listening to it, like they're gonna be really turned off if they listen to Beyonce and Beyonce is playing like super loud, and then they get to London Beck and like you can barely hear my song, and they're gonna be like,
it's not the same. It's
exactly.
It's right. This is why they give Academy Awards for stuff like set design and cinematography and wardrobe during the telecast, because you might not even realize it until they show the nominees. You'd be like, wow, that movie was really cool. That was a nice set design. And so the engineering part of it, the art of it, and the discipline of it is something that I'm really interested in. So thank you for kind of nerding out with me about that. Let's talk about some of the songs. What is your favorite song other than True North? Obviously. You can't.
I know. I'm like,
I'm not gonna force you to.
This is like asking me to like choose like my favorite child.
Yeah, right.
They're your babies.
Black Satin is the philosophical center.
Black Satin
of
is
the project.
Definitely the center. I will say that I like them for different reasons.
Yes.
Black Satin, when you all hear it, that's going to be very self-explanatory.
Right.
That's kind of like, I wanted this project to be like the reintroduction of London Beck. So like Black Satin is like very like out there, but it not in a way at all that people would expect, but you can also tell that my DNA is there. So it doesn't sound like I'm like reaching for anything.
Right.
It's like right where I need to be, but like a place at the same time. Like it sounds like a place where I've already been, but like a place where like people are also not expecting.
Right.
And then you've got like Territory, which I know is
that's my favorite. Territory is my favorite record.
Your favorite, just because. And when I created that song, I really wanted that one along with a few others. I think like Paces is another one. I wanted a couple that said something, but were also in some senses kind of like that quintessential like slow burn. I think is a good way to like describe that. And I think that with Territory, it worked really well that I was able to create this like slow burn, but like the lyrical content like is not a slow burn, and it's just kind of like I'm in the ring like Mike Tyson, like fighting, like throwing jabs like left and right. And then you've got like True North, which is that one's like incredibly special to me because it's a representation of what I've gone through and like where I intend to head.
It feels like a landing point.
Yeah.
Like it feels like you go on this journey, and then it reminds me of musical theater a lot in a way. Like the final, maybe not the final song, but the song before the final song, where this person's gone through this journey, and it's this journey of acceptance and just feeling where you are, and that's what I love about True North.
I completely agree. And Earlywine, who is a dear friend and the featured musician on that track, we I'd been wanting to work with her for quite a while, and we ended up making it happen with this project. And the very last, we had quite a few sessions beforehand, but the very last one, I think we like finished the track in like 5 hours, and like I recorded her vocals in 30 minutes. Which is probably like the quickest I've ever recorded like any sort of vocals. But it was really nice because she's a dear friend. She knows a little bit about my backstory, but we co-wrote kind of like the second verse of the song. And through writing, she was able to ask me like different questions to get me to like open up and be vulnerable and really talk about like what I was envisioning. And it's kind of funny that you mentioned that it kind of feels like the song before the very last in a musical, because every time I listen to that song, I think about, this is my like vision. I have this vision. I don't know why. Probably because I feel at peace when I'm like in nature, but I have this vision of like me being like on a road, and I've got like a whole bunch of like bags like bungee corded up to like this like beater car. I don't know why it's got to be a beater though. But
what is a beater car?
A Chevy Corsica.
A Chevy Corsica.
A Chevy Corsica. Okay.
So like
a hoopty? Is that what it is? A hoopty?
Yes.
Okay. A hoopty.
This vision of like all these bags like bungee corded to the top of a car, and I'm just kind of like looking back at the road that's behind me and acknowledging all that has happened along that road. But then I'm facing forward and getting in the car to move forward and enter, like the unknown basically.
Right.
This project is, we've talked about, especially like personally, like has been, I know the key word that we've been coming back to for all of us has been like transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's definitely been a rebirth. So I'm really about to enter this period, and not only as an individual, but also as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of like newness and there's a lot of unknown ahead of me. And I understand that not all of it's going to be pretty,
Right.
but nonetheless, I'm heading in that direction regardless, because I know that that's where I need to be. And heading in to the unknown is going to only help me move closer to where I really want to be in the end game.
Absolutely. And I just want to point out a couple of other things, because we definitely want people to stream the album, listen to the album, make their own interpretations, ask questions, engage with you on social media about songs. I remember the first time we heard Uninvited.
Oh my God.
And that was emotional. That was an emotional, so to let everybody know, somewhere along the way, we asked for everybody to play a song. Largely, we were not a part of the recording process. Very thankfully, in my book, we had for everybody who was involved in the fellowship, there was so much trust in the individual visions that had been provided to us, and the people who were working on the projects, that everything was perfectly fine. We kind of wanted to, I know for me, I kind of wanted to hear it a little bit later down the line as they continued to craft their vision. And they played a song apiece, and you play Uninvited. Why did you choose Uninvited to play for us? Was that just the song that you were feeling on that day? Or
I think that it does a really good job at, it's probably one of the most vulnerable pieces
yes,
on the project. And I know, like I said, somewhere, or no, I kind of feel like with this whole experience, part of it was I wanted to also grow as like an individual. And like usually like I'm the one that's like keeping it together and like like telling other people like you can keep it together, and like on the other end I'm not keeping it together. And I wanted to kind of use that to push myself in a direction to like be more open with like what I'm feeling. Again, like whether I'm like upset that day, you know, like it's really easy for people to ask how you're doing, and like you being, you know, like you say like I'm fine when you're really not. And I really wanted to force myself to kind of be in that space. And this also is part of the explanation of like the writing behind that song as well. Like I really just wanted to.
That's why we're here.
Yes. I really just wanted to kind of like venture into the darkness, so to speak. And I thought it was really fitting. I thought it was a really fitting song. I thought about it. I was going to play Territory at that point.
Okay.
But I thought that Uninvited Shadows was the most fitting because I thought it gave the most accurate glimpse into at least a significant portion of the overall story. I know that when we had our listening session, like we kind of talked about the first half is me kind of like diving headfirst into the dark. And then the second half is more kind of like a second act where I'm like trying to like claw my way out, where I eventually find the light with True North.
Right. Good records definitely tell a story. You said on that song that, you know, can't take my soul if no one answers the door. Been confined to the shore with no paddle, no oar. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, that there is on this, you know, when we see London, we see a lot of vibrant energy and things of that nature. But there is a very dark side. And it comes across sometimes in your picture. I mean, look at, you know, there's a mystery that's there that is very real.
Sure.
I think about Muse over, what is it? Muse over. Yeah. And how crazily I wigged out when you played that, because that's definitely like Bjork, Radiohead type vibes, and there's a voice in it. And you sent me and texted me what the voice says. I don't have my phone, but what does the voice say?
Oh my goodness!
We were talking about this today too.
I've completely forgotten. Completely. It's like there are two. So
right.
There's like one where it's like I love you, or like my sunshine, and then the other one is like can't. It's like you could never take away my love, or like both of them somewhere along those lines.
Okay.
And once and when you asked me, like, I had completely like, and I went back that night and I undid the reverse of the samples, and as soon as I listened to it, I remembered exactly why I had put them there and reversed them. I know you and I talked a little bit about kind of like there's this, because that's the turning point of the album.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about kind of like there's this voice that's kind of like out in the ether somewhere, and it's like it's trying to like call out to me, but I'm like having trouble interpreting it.
Yes.
And that was why I ended up making that kind of like decision to do the reverse. The song ended up, so when I wrote the song, it was about kind of processing the death of my mother and how going through that experience at that age gave me so much, but it also left me with an emptiness. More specifically, kind of like there are times when I think about that incident, and I feel like there's a detachment because of the fact that, and maybe it's because of the fact that it's at this point, especially, it's just happened long ago. Like that's almost 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, like this incident happened to be my mother. And so it's like there's this part of me reconciling, like, is it okay to like have this feeling, especially when it's about, you know, like a parent.
A feeling of detachment?
Yeah. Especially when it's about a parent, you know, like who I love very much. And even though they were only there for like those very short, like 5 years, like they've still played a huge part into where I am today. And so it's like a song reconciling that. And then of course I'm going through some kind of like current things. I kind of helped take care of my grandmother, who was a part of that force that like raised me and like is also a huge part of why I'm here today.
Right.
And she's kind of going through some like health issues. So through writing about like one tragedy, it kind of like helped me process and like really think about, and ended up overall being about something completely different that I'm going through in my life.
So it's cathartic in a way.
Yeah.
Wow. So you and the other fellows have set a standard for, I think, artistic merit, as well as content that is grounded in self-discovery and identity. What do you want people to take away from this project?
I want people to, that overall idea of like, this is a reintroduction of London Beck. So moving forward, I want people to, I think because of the fact that I have a hand in like a lot of things like behind the scenes, a lot of the other things that I can do kind of like get hidden. So in this project, like people will get to hear me play a little bit of guitar. People will get to hear like an arrangement that I completely composed.
Absolutely.
People will get to hear more than just me on songs, and get to hear not just in features, but also like in the production aspect as well. So I really want people to kind of get a more appropriate idea of who I am. I want people to get a clear idea of the only thing that exists is London Beck music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a type of artist where I'm like strictly like R&B or like strictly pop.
It's its
like
own genre,
hip-hop.
kind of.
It's essentially, it's like its own genre. And I want people to just kind of like understand that part of London Beck and like what I have to offer and bring to the table is that I kind of wanted this to be like a fun house in a sense. Like in a fun house, you've got like different areas.
Yeah, you got the Hall of Mirrors, and you got the bearded lady, and you got this, and you got,
So
absolutely.
I really wanted it to kind of be like this revolving, I guess, like space of different parts of me. I also want people to understand that, and this is something that I'm kind of, I guess, with the release of this project, holding myself to as well, that there is also a softer side of me. There's a more pensive and introspective side of London Beck. There's a certain reason why I do certain things, but above all, I just want to share my music, and my greatest hope that brings me much happiness is that other people will hear that music and not only enjoy it, but that it hopefully kind of gives them that little something that they need in order to kind of start pursuing the things that they need to be fulfilled.
Absolutely. I think it will. And I look forward to the responses that you'll get from the project, but more so the opportunities that it's going to give you, not only just in music, but in terms of assisting people towards being strong in who they are. I think that you definitely do that. And I think that is your part of your lasting effect on people. So congratulations.
Thank you.
An album is never done. It is only released. Congratulations on, not holding on to it with the grip of a titan and putting this out for the rest of the world to hear. I'm very proud of you. Not only about the music, but because you've been involved in what we've been doing. And I believe that there wouldn't be a fellowship without you and the other two. And I just can't say enough about, this project is about music, but it's about people, just like the podcast essentially. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Everybody, where is everybody going to be able to get this project?
Definitely all major platforms. Right. So if you've got Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Amazon Music, all of the above, you've got that there. But if you want to kind of put a little extra, coin in a deity's pocket so that I can continue.
Wait a minute, deities don't have pockets. How can you be a deity with pockets? What's that about?
You know what? This deity has a velvet bag that is always open if you want to put something in it.
A velvet bag, okay.
If you want to, put a little coin in my velvet bag so that I can continue pumping out music and even more content for the good people, you can purchase it on Bandcamp.
Absolutely. And they can go to your website.
And they can
lndnbck.com.
lndnbck.com. You get the full, completely renovated, brand new London Beck experience.
Access to all that. New website, new album, new knee-high boots, new everything. So we want to thank you for coming today. Maia, anything to share? Anything else to share?
You can also purchase a recording of London's Kickback series at amplify-fellowship.com.
Absolutely. And look out for the albums from the other fellows, Kenyatta Rashawn and Danny Darling as well. As we go to print, they will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Look out for the next episode of Zero Noise Podcast, which will also be with another one of the Amplify Fellows. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. I hate asking people to like and stuff. I hate it, but that's the metric by which we work, so like, share, and subscribe no matter where you are. We want to thank our sponsors one last time: Grove Studios, Leon Speakers, Detroit Originals, also edigging.com, as well as phonics.com, where you can go now and pick up God's Favorite Drums Part 2. I got to get you those too. And make certain that you support London and the Black Satin Sessions, all produced. And I want to make this very clear to people. Every song that you heard was also produced by London Beck, and every song is different. That's amazing to me. I just want to make sure that that's crystal clear. Until next time, this is Rod Wallace. And as always, support the artists and artisans around you. We definitely want to thank you too for coming, Maya. I'm so sorry.
No, thanks for having me.
Support the artists and the artisans around you, because when the music stops, everything else does too. Peace.